A retired combat veteran and his once legendary canine live quiet in a winter forest, stitching life back together one silent day at a time. But tonight the blizzard brings a scream that isn't the wind. A female police officer is kidnapped, not for money, but for a trade. Her captors want their notorious boss freed, so they hide her deep in the snow where no sirens reach. The rope isn't the worst part. The worst part is what it awakens in a man who swore he'd never go back. When the dog freezes and stares into the dark, the old war inside his bones stands up again. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, please subscribe for more stories of loyalty, faith, and courage. Snow came down like torn feathers from a furious sky, swallowing the pine forest in white noise. Wind hunted between trunks, and the only light was a moon blurred to a dull coin above the ridgeline. Cole Hayes lived where the map stopped being confident. The cabin sat back from the old service road like it was trying not to be seen. Timber walls dark with age, porch rails carved by storms and time. Inside, warmth didn't feel like comfort so much as a truce. Cole was 38, tall and spare in the way men become when they've learned to carry heavy things without showing it. His face had hard angles, cheekbones sharp, jaw squared, and a close-cropped beard that never grew soft, the kind that made him look permanently braced for bad news. A thin scar cut near his right eyebrow, a pale lightning mark earned long ago, and his eyes, steel gray, held a watchful distance, as if part of him still waited for an explosion that would never come. He wore the same uniform of ordinary survival every day. A worn brown leather jacket that creaked when he moved, a red and black plaid shirt underneath, and beneath that a second red and black plaid layer, like he'd decided warmth should come in familiar patterns. In town, people said he was polite but far away. In truth, he was kind in the quietest ways, fixing a fence post no one asked him to fix, leaving a bag of feed at a neighbor's shed without signing the favor. Yet he spoke like every word had a price. The war had taught him discipline. The years after had taught him silence. The only creature who could make him laugh without permission was Rex. Rex was an old working dog, a retired canine with the body of a German shepherd built for work, and the gaze of something that had seen too much to be easily surprised. He was 9 years old, thick-coated, black and tan, with a saddle of darker fur along his back, and a faint silvering around the muzzle that made him look wise in the way old men look wise. Part truth, part exhaustion. One ear had a notch from a long-ago scuffle, and his left hind leg carried a slight stiffness on cold nights, a souvenir from the last year of service. His eyes were amber and steady, the kind that didn't beg but negotiated. Rex had once been legendary, at least in the small circle of handlers who knew what a dog looked like when he decided, again and again, to run toward danger. Now he mostly ran toward the wood stove, toward the food bowl, toward the porch where he could watch the forest like a guardian statue somebody forgot to return to the temple. Cole spoke to him the way a man speaks to a friend when no one is listening, half prayer, half teasing. "You're retired," Cole would tell him, rubbing the thick fur behind Rex's neck. "You don't have to save the world anymore." Rex would stare back, expression flat as a judge, as if to say, that's not how promises work. On the night the blizzard turned mean, Cole was stacking split pine by the stove, trying to keep his hands busy so his mind wouldn't wander into old corridors. The wind shoved at the cabin like an impatient stranger, and somewhere in the dark the pines groaned as if the forest itself were complaining. Rex lay near the door, chin on his paws, breathing slow. Then it happened. The dog's whole body snapped into stillness. Rigid spine, ears forward, eyes pinned to the window like it was a doorway to something terrible. Cole felt the change before he understood it. It was the same shift he'd felt overseas when laughter died in a room, when the air grew tight and every instinct started speaking at once. Rex rose without sound and moved to the porch door, nose pressed to the crack where cold air slipped through. A low growl vibrated from his chest, not the angry kind, but the warning kind. Cole set down the wood. "What is it, old man?" he whispered. Rex didn't look at him. He listened. Then he barked. One harsh bark that cut through the storm like a flare. Not a bark for deer, not a bark for coyotes, a bark for people. Cole's heart did something annoying and human. It sped up, as if hope and dread were the same fuel. He pulled on gloves, grabbed his headlamp, and checked the old habit kit by the door. Compact first aid, a length of cord, a lighter, a folding knife. He didn't call anyone, not because he didn't trust help, but because help took time, and Rex never barked like that unless time was already bleeding out. On the porch, the wind slapped his cheeks raw. Snow spun in the beam of his light like 1,000 pale insects. Rex trotted ahead, tail level, moving with that deliberate confidence of a professional who resented being called out of retirement. Cole followed, boots crunching, leather jacket stiffening as the cold bit into it. The forest swallowed sound. Even his own breathing felt like it belonged to someone else. He tried to keep his mind practical, direction, distance, landmark, yet the blizzard kept dressing each tree in white robes, making the pines look like ancient priests gathered for some winter ritual. Cole had never been a religious man, but out here the weather acted like a god, loud, indifferent, and absolutely certain of its power. Rex led him off the porch path and down toward the old service road that cut through the trees, a ribbon of packed snow that disappeared into darkness. Cole's headlamp painted a narrow tunnel, and within it he saw the first sign, a scuffed patch where someone had stepped hard and slid. Then another. Then the unmistakable imprint of hurried boots, deep and uneven, heading away from the road and toward the denser timber. Rex lowered his nose, inhaled, and his body leaned forward like a compass needle, finding north. Cole crouched, fingers brushing the edge of a footprint. Fresh. The snow inside hadn't settled smooth yet. A gust blew powder into his face, and he blinked it away, irritated at how the storm tried to erase evidence like a criminal with a broom. "Okay," he muttered, more to himself than the dog. "Someone's out here." Rex moved again, weaving into the trees, and Cole followed, stepping where Rex stepped. Soft ground, no brittle branches, because the old skills lived in his muscles even if he pretended they were dead. 10 minutes in, the forest offered another clue, a thin line in the snow, like something had been dragged. Cole's stomach tightened. He shone the light along it and saw, half buried, a small square of dark fabric. He plucked it free and turned it in his glove. A patch. Law enforcement. The edges were frayed where it had torn loose, and a dusting of snow clung to the embroidered letters like frost on a grave marker. Cole felt his throat go dry. Rex sniffed the patch once, then looked up at Cole with a blunt urgency that was almost accusatory. Cole huffed a short laugh, humor as a life jacket. "Don't give me that look," he murmured. "I didn't put the officer in the snow." Rex sneezed, unimpressed, then continued. The tracks grew more chaotic. 2 sets of boot prints now, maybe 3, overlapping, circling, stopping and starting, as if whoever was out here had argued with the terrain. Cole noticed the angle of the steps. Heavy heel strikes, someone moving fast with weight. He spotted the marks of a vehicle tire near a bend in the road, fresh ruts cut into the drift, then nothing but the storm's relentless attempt to heal the wound. Rex paused at a cluster of spruce, hackles lifting. Cole's headlamp caught a flash of something metallic near a tree root. He knelt, brushed away snow, and found a small badge, oval, silver, the kind meant to shine on a chest in daylight. It was cold enough to sting through his glove. A name was stamped on the back, half obscured by ice, but the word police was clear, shouting its identity into the blizzard. Cole's mind tried to build a story that didn't end badly. Maybe an accident. Maybe someone dropped it while helping someone else. Maybe. But the drag line, the tire ruts, the hurried prints that didn't look like rescue, they all stood like witnesses in a silent courtroom. Cole swallowed, the familiar taste of adrenaline rising. The war inside his bones stirred, not as rage, but as readiness, the old machinery humming awake. He hated that part of himself. He also knew it saved lives. Rex pressed close to Cole's leg, steady and warm, and for a second Cole felt something almost tender. Not romance, not softness, but the kind of love that grows between two survivors who've kept each other breathing. "All right," Cole whispered, voice low and rough. "All right, partner, we see it." Rex's tail flicked once. Agreement, not comfort. The wind surged, and somewhere deeper in the trees came a sound that wasn't a branch snapping. It was a muffled cry, swallowed quickly by snow and distance, like the forest had tried to cover its mouth. Cole froze, heart punching hard. Rex didn't hesitate. He surged forward into the white, and Cole went after him, leather jacket creaking, boots slipping, mind splitting into two voices. One that begged for safety, and one that reminded him he'd never been able to walk away when someone was alone in the cold. In his head, he heard his own bitter joke from earlier. "You don't have to save the world anymore." Rex answered without words, leading the way like an old guardian from a myth who refused to let the hero retire. By the time Cole reached the next line of trees, he had made a decision he hadn't spoken aloud yet, but his body already knew. Tonight wasn't about hiding from the past. Tonight was about keeping a stranger alive long enough for morning to matter. Chapter summary inside the story. In a brutal blizzard, Cole Hayes and his retired K9 Rex discover fresh tracks, a drag mark, tire ruts, and a fallen police patch and badge, proof someone has been taken into the winter forest, and a distant muffled cry pushes Cole to follow Rex deeper into danger. Cole moved like the storm had taught him, slow when he needed to listen, fast when he needed to act. The forest ahead was a cathedral of snow-laden pine, each branch bowed under white weight, every sound muffled into a soft, dangerous quiet. Rex ran point without being told, shoulders rolling under his thick coat, nose low, reading the ground like scripture. The drag line Cole had seen back near the service road grew darker here, not in color, but in meaning. Flattened snow, scuffed bark, broken twigs at shin height, the signatures of panic and force. Cole's headlamp cut a thin tunnel through swirling flakes. Beyond that tunnel, the world did not exist. That was the danger of blizzards. They made you think your light was the whole truth. Rex stopped so hard it was like he hit an invisible wall. His ears snapped forward. His chest rose and fell in quick bursts. Then he whined, a sound he almost never made, not even when he was hurt. Cole's stomach tightened. "Show me," he murmured. Rex darted left, weaving through a thicket where rhododendron leaves curled like frozen green fists. Cole followed, ducking low, pushing branches aside with gloved hands. The smell hit him before the sight did. Human sweat, stale fear, and something metallic that didn't belong in clean snow. Rex's pause slowed, careful now, like he knew he was approaching something fragile. Behind a fallen spruce trunk half buried in drift, there she was, folded into the white, like the forest had tried to erase her. A woman in a dark patrol jacket, face turned sideways, hair plastered to her cheek with ice. Her wrists were bound behind her back with zip ties, and a strip of tape, silver, frost-stiff, covered her mouth. Snow had dusted her eyelashes, turning them into tiny white combs. For a split second, Cole's mind tried to deny the image because denial was easier than responsibility. Then her chest lifted in a shallow, shuddering breath, and the denial snapped. Cole dropped to his knees beside her. The cold bit through his jeans immediately, sharp as teeth. He leaned close, shining his light away from her eyes. "Hey," he whispered, voice low, like a prayer in a war zone. "You can hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, brown, glassy, unfocused, and for a moment the fear in them was so raw it looked like pain. She tried to move, but the zip ties held, and she made a muffled sound behind the tape. Cole's hands steadied themselves by force of will. "Don't fight," he said. "You're safe. I'm going to get this off. Quiet, okay?" He pulled his knife with a practiced motion, careful not to flash the blade in a way that would escalate her panic. The tape was frozen to her skin at the edges. Cole's jaw clenched. He warmed it with the side of his glove first, then peeled slowly, whispering nonsense just to give her something to hold on to. "Easy. Easy. There you go." When the tape came free, her lips were chapped and blue-tinged, her breathing ragged, as if every inhale scraped her throat. "Name," Cole said softly. "Tell me your name." Her voice was thin, a reed in winter wind. Nora Blake." She coughed, and the cough sounded too small for the amount of cold she'd swallowed. She was early 30s, maybe 32, with pale skin that had gone gray under the storm, and freckles across her nose that seemed almost stubborn, like they refused to disappear even in a blizzard. Her hair, dark brown and cut just past her jaw, had been shoved back into a loose ponytail at some point, but now strands clung in wet ropes along her temple. Cole clocked the details the way he used to clock threats. The bruising on her cheekbone, the red marks at her wrists, the way one boot was missing and her sock was soaked. A cop, but right now she looked like any human the winter wanted to kill. Rex pressed in beside her with a soft huff, laying his broad body along her side. His heat was immediate, a living blanket. Nora's eyes darted to him, wide. Rex didn't bare teeth. He simply stared, calm and solemn, like an old soldier guarding a wounded friend. Cole cut the zip ties at her wrists, then moved to her ankles. "You're hypothermic," he said, not accusing, just naming reality. "Can you move your fingers?" Nora tried. Her hands trembled, but they moved. "Good," Cole murmured. "You're still in there." Humor edged his voice, gentle. "Don't you go dying on me. I'm not equipped for paperwork." Nora made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. It broke on the way out. That was the thing about fear. It stored itself in the body, and the moment someone loosened the knots, it tried to escape in strange shapes. Cole shrugged out his outer gloves and pressed 2 fingers to her neck, checking pulse. Fast, weak. He glanced at her uniform. Sheriff's Department patch on the shoulder. Her radio. Gone. Duty belt, half missing. Whoever took her had been methodical. Cole's thoughts flashed hot for a second. Anger, not at her, not at the storm, but at the men who had decided a woman's life was a bargaining chip. He forced the anger into a narrow channel. Action. "We need to get you under cover," he said. "No fire. Too visible. But we can get you out of the wind." He looked at Rex. "Guard!" Rex's tail thumped once, low and controlled. Cole slipped an emergency blanket from his pack, the thin metallic kind that crinkled like foil. He wrapped it around Nora's shoulders, tucking it tight. It wasn't much, but it trapped heat. Rex stayed pressed against her, the dog's breath warm against her jacket. Nora swallowed hard. "You'd live out here?" "Close," Cole said. "Cabin's not far." He didn't mention how not far in a blizzard could still be a mile of dying if you made mistakes. He slid an arm behind her back, testing her ability to stand. Nora tried and failed. Her knees buckled like hinges made of ice. Cole caught her easily. She was lighter than she looked, all muscle and tension. "Okay," he said, patient. "No hero act. We do this smart." He shifted, letting her lean against him while Rex moved ahead, sniffing the air. They weren't alone. Cole felt it the way you feel a stare in a dark room. He didn't see men. But he saw their work, cut branches like someone had moved fast and rough, and a faint smell of gasoline near the drag trail. Maybe a vehicle nearby, maybe a generator, maybe a cabin they'd used. The storm kept trying to erase tracks, but it couldn't erase intention. Nora's voice came in broken pieces as they moved, each word a shiver. They grabbed me when I stopped on County Road 12. She winced. Dispatch sent me to check a stranded vehicle. Cole's mind painted it. A decoy, hazards on, a silhouette in a ditch. The oldest trick. How many? He asked. 3? Maybe 4? Masks? 1? Tall? Smelled like cigarette smoke. She swallowed. He called someone on a burner. Said, "We've got the cop." Cole's jaw tightened. He adjusted his grip on her, lifting more of her weight. "Why you?" Nora's eyes fluttered, focus drifting like a candle flame in wind. "Not me," she whispered. "It's him." Cole paused, because that single pronoun carried a whole storm of meaning. "Who?" Nora's lips trembled. "Their boss. Duke Graves Malloy." The name hit like a stone dropped in water. Cole had heard it in town the way people spoke about wolves, quietly, like saying it might summon them. Graves was a ghost story with a rap sheet, a man whose reputation walked into rooms before he did. Nora's voice strengthened for a moment, anger pulling her awake. "We arrested him 2 nights ago, task force. He fought like he wanted to die famous." She coughed, then spat snow. "His crew wants him back." Cole stared down at her, snow collecting in his beard. "They took you to trade." Nora nodded, eyes shining with tears that froze on her lashes. "They said they don't want money. They want the cage door opened." Her hands shook under the emergency blanket. "Cole, please, call it in." She didn't know his name yet. She said it anyway, like the blizzard had whispered it to her. Cole didn't correct her. He looked out into the trees, listening. The wind howled. Somewhere, a branch snapped. Rex's head lifted. He didn't bark. That was worse. "We will," Cole said carefully, "but we do it right." Because calling it in meant sirens, searchlights, radios crackling. And if those men were close, if they were watching their asset, noise would make them move. Cole had seen that in war. Pressure made predators either flee or strike. Nora's gaze locked on his, suddenly sharp despite the cold. "You've done this before," she whispered. Not the kidnapping. The decision under stress, the measured calm, the weight of choosing when other people panicked. Cole gave a humorless half-smile. "I've done worse," he said. Then he softened his voice, because she needed a handrail, not a confession. "Listen to me, Nora. You stay with Rex's heat. You keep breathing slow. If you feel sleepy, you tell me. Sleep is a liar in this weather." Nora tried to smirk. It came out crooked. "Yes, sir." Cole snorted quietly. "Don't sir me, I'm unemployed." That got her a real small laugh. It lasted half a second, then turned into a wince. Still, it was a good sign, like a heartbeat. Rex nudged Nora's shoulder gently, almost scolding. She blinked at him. "Good dog," she whispered, voice cracking. Rex's eyes softened, and for a moment Cole saw the old magic again. How a dog could make a stranger feel less alone in a cruel world. They moved toward a low dip in the terrain where wind couldn't whip as hard. Cole kept his headlamp dim, sweeping in short arcs. He found a shallow overhang where roots formed a half-cave beneath a fallen tree. Not perfect, but better than open air. He eased Nora down, keeping the emergency blanket wrapped tight, then pulled his own scarf free and pressed it into her hands. "Hold this on your face," he said. "Warm the air before it hits your lungs." Nora obeyed, eyes half-lidded. Cole looked around, then at Rex. "Stay," he told the dog, and Rex lay beside Nora again, a thick, living barrier against the cold. Cole stepped back into the snow and scanned the forest, forcing his senses outward. He found a footprint that wasn't theirs, a deeper tread pattern, fresh, heading in a curve that could bring someone close. He felt the old war inside his bones stand up like a man waking from a nightmare. He whispered to the storm, bitter and almost amused. "You had to pick tonight." Then he came back to Nora, crouched low, and made the promise he didn't want to make because promises were expensive. "You're not staying hidden in this white," he said. "Not tonight." Nora's eyes fluttered. "They'll come back," she whispered. Cole nodded once. "I know." Rex's ears perked as if he'd understood every word. Cole reached into his pack and pulled out a small chemical hand warmer, cracked it until it began to heat, then slid it into Nora's palm. "Squeeze it," he said. "Stay awake." Nora's fingers curled around it like it was a candle. She stared at him, fear and gratitude braided together. "Why, are you helping?" she asked. Cole's mouth twitched. The honest answer was complicated, because he couldn't not, because the dog wouldn't allow it, because he was trying to become the kind of man the war didn't destroy. Instead, he gave her the simpler truth. "Because you're here," he said, "and because Rex heard you first." Rex exhaled, as if proud and annoyed at the same time. In the storm beyond the overhang, something moved, too steady to be deer, too deliberate to be wind. Cole's fingers tightened around his knife. The blizzard raged like a mythic beast, trying to bury all stories under snow. But Cole and Rex had found one story the storm couldn't swallow. A woman still breathing, a bargain demanded by criminals, and the beginning of a hunt that would not end quietly. Chapter summary inside the story. Cole and Rex track the signs deeper into the blizzard, find Officer Nora Blake bound and freezing behind a fallen spruce, cut her loose, stabilize her with an emergency blanket and Rex's body heat, and learn she was kidnapped as leverage to trade for notorious crime boss Duke Graves Malloy. Then Cole spots fresh Chuji footprints nearby, signaling the captors may be close. Wind kept shoving snow against the root hollow like it wanted to seal it shut and forget there were people inside. Cole crouched at the mouth of their makeshift shelter, headlamp dimmed, watching the forest breathe. The blizzard had softened everything, edges, sound, distance, until the pines looked like hooded figures standing in judgment. Behind him, Nora's breathing came in shallow pulls through Cole's scarf. Rex lay pressed to her side, a furnace in fur, amber eyes open and unblinking, as if he could will warmth into her bones. Cole's mind, however, was not warm. It was calculating, cold and fast in the old way. He traced the new footprint he'd found in his head like a map. A man had come close, close enough to hear if Nora cried out, close enough to smell them if the wind turned. Cole's jaw tightened. He had saved her from the snow. Now he had to save her from men. Nora blinked at him, trying to keep her eyes open, fighting the heavy, sweet lie of hypothermia that whispered, "Rest, just rest." "How long?" she rasped. Her voice was still thin, but sharper than before, like a blade being pulled from ice. Cole checked his watch. Old, scuffed, the kind soldiers didn't trust, but still wore. "Not long," he said. He didn't say what he meant. Not long until they either moved or got found. He knelt beside her and touched her shoulder through the emergency blanket. "Stay with me. Tell me what they said on the radio." Nora swallowed, throat working. "They used a cheap handheld, not dispatch. One of them kept checking for chatter." She paused, eyes squeezing shut, as a gust rattled the branches overhead. He called the boss Graves, like it was a prayer. Cole's lips twitched, humorless. Some men worship the wrong gods. Nora gave a weak exhale that might have been a laugh. They said, "Tell the department we want Duke Graves Malloy." She struggled to form the next words. "They want a trade. They said, if the cops don't open the cell door, they'll leave me out here, as a message." The word message made Cole's spine go rigid. He had seen messages. He had seen what cruelty did when it wanted to be remembered. He looked at Nora's bruised cheekbone, the angry red on her wrists. The storm outside was harsh, but it was honest. Men were worse because they chose it. "Did they say when?" Cole asked. Nora nodded, a small movement. "By dawn, before the roads get plowed. They think the blizzard buys them time." Rex's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. He lifted his head and stared toward the trees, nostrils flaring. Cole followed the dog's gaze and saw nothing but white and black and moving snow, yet his skin prickled. "They're not far," Cole said. It wasn't fear. It was a fact. Nora's eyes widened. "Then we have to go, now." She tried to sit up, and pain knifed through her legs. She gasped and collapsed back. Rex whined once and pressed his chest into her, anchoring her. Cole held up a hand. "We go," he agreed, "but not like you think." Nora's brow furrowed, stubbornness breaking through the cold. Even half frozen, she carried herself like a woman used to being the one who arrived with the sirens. Nora Blake was the kind of officer who kept her hair neat because chaos didn't get to take everything. She had a disciplined face, strong nose, determined mouth, even now, and an intensity in her eyes that said she'd fought for every inch of authority in a world that loved to underestimate her. Cole respected that. He also knew it could get her killed tonight. "If we sprint for the road," Cole continued, "they'll see our tracks. They'll follow. They'll either take you again or cut you off." Nora's jaw tightened. "So what's your plan?" Cole stared out at the storm, as if it might answer. Then he looked down at Rex. "We hide you," he said. "We make them chase me." Nora blinked, confusion and anger mixing. "You want to use yourself as bait." Cole shrugged, as if it was a small thing, as if he hadn't spent years trying not to volunteer for danger anymore. "It's not bait," he said dryly. "It's strategy. Also, I'm harder to carry." Rex sneezed, which sounded like a rude laugh. Nora's lips twitched despite herself, then she shook her head. "No. I'm the hostage. They'll keep hunting for me." "Exactly," Cole said. "So we change the story they're following." He reached into his pack and pulled out a length of cord and a small strip of cloth. He tied the cloth around a low branch outside the root hollow, let it flap in the wind like a careless signal. Then he took a handful of snow and brushed it across their footprints to blur the trail. "We need time," he said. "We need them to think you moved in one direction while you're actually somewhere else." Nora stared at him. "You were special forces," she said quietly. It wasn't a question now. It was recognition. Cole's mouth went still. He hated that label. It felt like a hand trying to drag him back into a life he'd buried. "I was a mistake with a government paycheck," he muttered. Nora didn't smile. She watched him like she was seeing the war inside his bones, the old ghost standing behind his eyes. Cole pulled his jacket off, leather stiff with cold, and layered it over Nora's emergency blanket. Under it, his red and black plaid shirts looked brighter against the snow, almost absurdly alive. "Keep this," he said. "You're not dying on my watch." Nora's eyes flashed. "And you are?" Cole leaned closer, voice low, a dark joke wrapped around a real promise. "I'm annoyingly durable." Rex shifted, as if to protest the idea of being separated from his human. Cole rubbed the dog's head once, firm. "You stay with her," he told Rex. Guard! Rex's amber eyes held his for a long second. The dog's loyalty was not blind, it was chosen. Then Rex lay back down beside Nora, pressing his body against her again with a soft huff that said, "I don't like it, but I understand." Cole exhaled slowly. He didn't have the luxury of second-guessing. He needed a safe pocket for Nora, somewhere the kidnappers wouldn't look first. The root hollow was too obvious now. They'd already come close. Cole scanned the terrain in his memory. About a quarter-mile upslope was an old ravine line where wind piled snow into drifts so deep it swallowed saplings. Dangerous for movement, perfect for hiding. He spoke quickly, efficient. "Can you crawl?" he asked Nora. "A little," she said, voice shaking. Her pride tried to stand before her body could. Cole nodded. "Then we move you to the ravine. Quiet. No light." He dimmed his headlamp until it was a dull ember. Rex stood, shaking snow off his back like a wolf. Cole slid one arm under Nora's shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted. She was lighter than he expected, but her muscles were tight, resisting helplessness. She clenched her jaw, refusing to whimper. Cole respected her for that, too. The forest fought them. Snow grabbed at boots. Wind slapped faces. Nora's breath rasped against Cole's scarf. Rex paced close, checking ahead, then circling back, tail low, ears pivoting like radar. They reached the ravine line, a shadow in the white, where the ground dropped sharply. Cole found a shallow cut beneath a rock shelf, half covered by drift. He eased Nora into it, then packed snow gently around the entrance to break the outline. He left a fist-sized air gap near her face, like a tiny cave mouth. "This is going to feel wrong," he said, eyes steady, "but it will keep you alive." Nora's eyes widened. "You're burying me?" Cole's mouth quirked. "Temporary, like a very rude blanket fort." Rex's tail flicked once. Nora swallowed, then nodded, trusting him with the kind of trust that only comes when you've run out of other choices. Cole pushed Rex close to the opening. "You stay right here," he told the dog. "If anyone comes, you don't bark, you breathe." Rex stared at him like a disappointed father. Cole leaned in and whispered, softer now, the emotion slipping through the cracks. "Please." That single word carried more weight than any order. Rex lowered himself beside the opening, his body a dark mound against the snow, his eyes never leaving the trees. Cole turned back to Nora. He pressed his fingers briefly to her forehead, cold, too cold, then tucked the emergency blanket tighter. "I'm going to lead them away," he said. "When it's safe, I'll come back." Nora grabbed his sleeve weakly. "Cole, don't do this alone." Cole looked down at her hand, then at her face. Her freckles stood out like constellations. Her eyes held fear, yes, but also something harder. Responsibility. She didn't want to be saved by someone dying for it. Cole felt an old ache bloom in his chest. Love and loss were cousins. They wore the same coat. "I'm not alone," he said, glancing at Rex. Then he added, half-smile sharp as a shard of ice, "And the forest is full of witnesses. Men do stupid things when they think no one's watching." He stood and stepped away, forcing himself not to look back too long. Looking back made you hesitate. Hesitation got people killed. He moved downwind, away from the ravine, breaking branches deliberately, stepping hard to leave clear prints. He took a small piece of Nora's torn tape and pressed it onto a tree trunk where it would catch a flashlight beam, like a silver wink. He wanted them to see it. He wanted them angry and confident. He wanted them chasing the wrong story. Within minutes, he heard it. Voices, muffled by snow, but real. A flashlight beam swung between trunks. "She was here," a man snarled. Another voice, lower, calmer, with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Spread out. She can't go far. The cop's half frozen." Cole stayed behind a pine, watching. 4 silhouettes moved through the storm. One was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark parka and moving like a man who enjoyed control. His face was mostly hidden by a hood, but when the light hit, Cole saw a rough beard and a sharp nose. Brent Kellen, the kind of man whose anger had become his personality, because it was easier than admitting fear. He swung his flashlight like a weapon. "Find her," Brent hissed. "We get Graves back by dawn, or we're dead men." Cole's stomach went cold. So it wasn't just loyalty. It was desperation. Someone higher up, someone in the criminal food chain, would punish failure. That made them reckless. Cole let his boots crunch deliberately. One of the men froze. "Over there!" the man shouted, pointing toward Cole's sound. Cole stepped out just enough for the flashlight to catch the red and black plaid under his open shirt, the outline of his face. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't run yet. He wanted them to commit. Brent's beam snapped onto him. "Who the hell are you?" Brent barked. Cole's voice came out calm, almost Vajid. "Just a guy who hates littering," he said, nodding toward the disturbed snow. Humor again, because fear hated being laughed at. Brent took a step forward, then another. "Where's the cop?" Cole smiled without warmth. "Not your business." Brent's jaw tightened. "Wrong answer." Cole turned and ran, not blindly, strategically, leading them down toward the thicker timber where visibility dropped. Behind him he heard boots pounding, curses thrown like knives. The chase began, and the devil's bargain tightened its noose. 4 men hunting 1 veteran through a blizzard, while a half-buried officer and a retired K-9 waited in silence for the world to choose who it would be tonight. Chapter summary inside the story. Nora reveals the kidnapper's deadline and trade demand for Duke Graves Malloy. Cole chooses a hide-save-lure strategy, moves Nora to a concealed ravine pocket, orders Rex to guard silently, then deliberately leaves decoy tracks and draws the kidnappers, led by Brent Kellen, into chasing him away from Nora's hiding place. Cole ran until the blizzard swallowed the sound of pursuit, and the burn in his lungs tasted like old iron. He didn't sprint like a panicked man. He moved like someone who understood distance, angles, and the way snow could be both cover and trap. Branches slapped his shoulders. Powder blew into his beard and melted against his skin, then froze again. Behind him, Brent Kellen's crew crashed through the timber in a clumsy fury. Loud, rushed, convinced volume could substitute for certainty. Cole let them hear him just enough to keep their hunger up, then cut hard left through a stand of young pine where the trunks grew close together like fence posts. A bigger man would have slowed. Cole was lean and practiced. He slid between trees, stepped on the packed roots to keep from post-holing, and forced his body into that familiar cold tunnel where fear got filed away behind procedure. He listened, counted breaths, watched the wind direction. When the voices faded, he dropped behind a boulder crowned with snow and went still. Silence returned in layers. His heart hammered, but his mind stayed razor-edged. He waited until he could no longer hear boots. Then he moved again, back toward Nora, but not along the same line. He circled wide, using the slope to mask his prints. The forest was a chessboard. He refused to be the pawn. He found his own decoy trail and erased sections with a sweeping branch, then stepped backward in his old boot marks for 10 paces before veering off. It wasn't magic. It was patience. Something war had forced him to learn, because impatience got friends killed. Somewhere upslope, a shout rose and died in the wind. They were still looking for him. Good. Cole's guilt tried to bite him. Guilt for leaving Nora, even temporarily, in the snow. He shoved it down. Nora needed time, Rex needed quiet, and Cole needed to turn this forest into a message the right people could read. He reached the ravine pocket where he'd hidden Nora with the care of a thief, returning to his own crime scene. He approached from downwind, crouched low, and whistled once, soft, 2 notes. Rex's head appeared like a shadow growing eyes. The dog didn't bark. He simply slid forward, body low, then pressed his muzzle against Cole's glove, sniffing hard as if checking whether Cole had been replaced by a stranger. Cole exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Good boy," he whispered. Rex's tail flicked once, almost scolding. "Don't do that again." Nora was still there, tucked beneath the rock shelf, her face pale and rimmed with frost. Her eyes opened sluggishly when Cole brushed snow away from the air gap. "You came back," she rasped. There was disbelief in her voice, like she'd lived long enough to know people said that and didn't always mean it. "I said I would," Cole answered. He tried to keep it casual, but the words landed heavy. Promises were the one currency he still respected. He checked her fingers and toes quickly, then pressed the chemical warmer into her palm again. "How's your head?" "Spinning," she admitted. Her gaze flicked to the darkness beyond Cole's shoulder. "Are they—" "Not here," Cole said, "but close." Rex's ears angled toward the wind as if to confirm. Cole made a decision in the space between Nora's breaths. The ravine hideout was good for a pause, not for a night. If Brent's men started a grid search, they might stumble close. Cole needed Nora under cover with real shelter, and he needed a trail that would lead rescuers to her without leading kidnappers first. He lifted Nora carefully, and she swallowed a sound of pain. Her pride flared. "I can walk," she tried. Cole gave her a look that said, "Not tonight." "You can survive," he corrected. "Walking is optional." Even half-frozen, Nora's mouth twitched. Rex moved beside them, shoulder brushing Nora's knee like a living handrail. They traveled in short bursts, keeping to the lee side of ridges where wind had scoured snow thin, using trees as walls. Cole's cabin was still too far with Nora in this state, and he didn't want to drag the whole mess back to his door anyway. He aimed for something he'd noticed on his land months ago. An old deer blind beneath a thick pine canopy, half collapsed, but with enough structure to block wind. When they reached it, it looked like a broken prayer. Wooden slats, a sagging roof, and a floor raised just above the snow line. Cole cleared the entrance, then guided Nora inside. The cramped space smelled of old sap and damp rope. It was ugly, but it was shelter. Cole pulled out a small collapsible cup and his metal canteen, then poured water. He used his body heat and the friction of his palms to warm the canteen first, then let Nora sip slowly. "Don't gulp," he warned. "Your stomach will revolt." "Bossy," she breathed. "Experienced," he returned. Rex curled around Nora's legs like a guard dog in a storybook. Except this story didn't have magic, just stubborn loyalty. Cole bandaged Nora's wrist where the zip ties had cut into skin. The cuts were superficial, but angry red, swollen with cold. He wrapped them snug, but not tight, then checked the bruise on her cheekbone. "You got hit," he murmured. Nora's eyes sharpened. "When I wouldn't tell them the access code for my dash cam." Pride sparked, and Cole respected her even more. She was not just surviving, she was resisting. "Good," Cole said simply. "You kept your spine." Nora's gaze lingered on him. "You're calm," she said, almost accusing. Cole snorted quietly. "I'm not calm, I'm organized." He didn't say the other truth. Panic had rules too, and he'd memorized them the hard way. Outside, the storm shifted. Snow thickened, wind changed direction. Cole heard something distant. An engine? No. Too muffled, too intermittent. He pushed his ear toward a crack in the blind and listened. A faint crackle answered. Radio. Not police dispatch, too cheap, too close. Brent's men were still communicating. Cole's spine tightened. "They're coordinating," he whispered. Nora's eyes widened. "They'll widen the search." Cole nodded. "So we get ahead of them." He reached into his pack and pulled out his waterproof notebook, the same one he'd used like a confession in Chapter Y. He tore out a page and wrote with slow, deliberate block letters, "Officer Nora Blake alive. Kidnappers seek trade for Duke Graves Malloy. Location: East Ridge, Deer Blind Shelter. Follow markers, do not use sirens." He added a rough compass arrow and a distance estimate to the service road. Then he folded the paper, slid it into a small zip bag, and taped the bag beneath a bright strip of cloth he'd torn from his own inner plaid layer, red and black, unmistakable against white snow. Nora watched him, puzzled. "What is that?" "A breadcrumb," Cole said, "for the right people." "And how do the right people find it?" Cole's mouth tightened. "They won't unless I make them." He stepped out of the blind, pulled his headlamp lower, and began building a trail, not for prey, but for rescue. He used the oldest, simplest language in the wilderness. Broken branches at eye level pointing in the right direction, 3 stones stacked with the top stone angled like a finger, a long vertical scrape on bark like a blaze. He made them small, subtle, things a trained eye would notice, but a frantic criminal might miss. He placed them in pairs, offset, so if one got covered by fresh snow, the other might survive. Rex followed him at heel when Cole returned briefly. Then Cole pointed back toward Nora. "Stay," he ordered, voice firm. Rex hesitated. The dog's whole identity was built on moving toward danger with Cole, but Rex looked at Nora's pale face, the tremble in her hands, and made a choice. He lay back down by her legs, eyes locked on the doorway. Cole's chest tightened. He didn't deserve this dog. He used it anyway. Cole moved out into the trees and expanded the markers in a careful arc, pushing them toward the service road and toward a known landmark, an old rusted milepost sign half buried by drift. If a ranger, a deputy, or a volunteer searcher came in, they'd start at the road. Cole was building them a story to follow. He also knew Brent might send someone back to the road to check for police. That was why he made the markers subtle. This wasn't a bright trail of breadcrumbs. It was a whisper. He worked with numb fingers, breaking branches cleanly so the pale wood showed against the dark bark. He stacked rocks where snow hadn't fully covered the ground. He carved a small notch into a tree trunk with his knife. 3 quick slashes, then 1 longer slash beneath. Not a gang sign, not a message for criminals, a signal for anyone who had ever searched for a missing person in winter. Deliberate, repeated, intentional. As he worked, Cole's thoughts drifted to his cabin phone. Landline, weak but functional. If he could get back there, he could call in the situation. But calling in was not as simple as dialing and praying. He didn't trust the response time. He didn't trust the noise. He didn't trust the kidnappers not to kill Nora out of spite if they felt cornered. He needed to report without triggering a loud hunt. That meant finding someone he could reach quietly. Someone who understood restraint. A ranger, a dispatcher with sense. Someone who would bring searchers on foot, not a parade. Cole's mind landed on a name he'd heard at the diner once, spoken with respect. Sheriff Sergeant Eli Mercer. Older, careful, known for not swinging first. If anyone could coordinate a silent sweep, it was a man like that. Cole finished the last marker near the milepost and returned to the deer blind fast, scanning for any sign of intrusion. The blind stood unchanged. Rex's eyes met his, steady. Nora was awake, barely, her gaze tracking him like she was afraid he might vanish again. Cole crouched beside her and handed her another slow sip of water. "I left signs," he said. "If your people come in from the road, they'll find us." Nora swallowed. "If," she whispered. Cole's jaw tightened. He hated that word. He leaned closer so she could see his face despite the dim light. "Not if," he said. "When?" Nora studied him for a long second, then nodded, not because she fully believed it, but because she needed to borrow his certainty. Outside, the radio crackle returned, closer now. Rex's body stiffened, ears forward. Nora's breath hitched. Cole's hand slid to his knife again. "They're sweeping," he whispered. "They're getting smarter." Nora's eyes flashed, anger warming her for a moment. "Then we have to move again." Cole's mind spun, weighing options like ammunition. Move too soon and leave a trail. Stay too long and get discovered. He looked at Rex, at Nora, at the thin slats of shelter between them and the storm. Then he made the next decision, the kind that always felt like stepping off a cliff. "We don't run," he said. "We vanish." He pulled more snow up against the blind's lower wall from outside, thickening the outline, then returned and dimmed the headlamp until darkness nearly swallowed them. Rex pressed closer to Nora. Cole sat with his back against the wall, becoming another shadow among shadows, listening to boots and voices approach like wolves, circling a den. Chapter summary inside the story. Cole relocates Nora to a hidden deer-blind shelter, treats her cuts, warms and hydrates her slowly, then quietly builds subtle rescue markers, broken branches, rock stacks, bark blazes, leading from the service road toward Nora's position. As kidnappers widen their search and radio chatter grows closer, Cole chooses concealment over flight, preparing to vanish with Nora and Rex as the threat closes in. The deer blind became a coffin if Cole let it. He felt that truth in the way the air changed, less storm, more intention. The radio crackle outside wasn't just noise, it was coordination, men turning the forest into a net. Cole sat in darkness with his back to the slats, headlamp deadened to almost nothing, listening to boots compress snow in uneven rhythms. Nora lay curled under his leather jacket and the emergency blanket, eyes open but glassy, fighting sleep like it was an enemy with a knife. Rex stayed pressed to her legs, the dog's body a steady black and tan hill, ears twitching with every whisper of movement. Cole's mind worked like a cold machine. Distance of footsteps, direction of voices, wind shifts that could betray scent. If they found the blind, they wouldn't shoot first, not if they wanted Nora alive. That meant they'd rush. That meant Cole could exploit their greed. Greed made wolves clumsy. A flashlight beam sliced between pines, swinging closer, then away, then back. A man's voice hissed, "Check the low shelters. She can't walk far." Another answered, "Boss says no mistakes. We need her breathing." Cole heard Brent's tone in that second voice even without seeing him. Commanding, clipped, the kind of man who learned control because life once made him feel powerless. Cole's jaw flexed. He'd met men like that in war zones and bar fights. Bullies with a story they told themselves to justify cruelty. The beam came again, brighter, closer. Rex's nose lifted, nostrils flaring. Cole placed 2 fingers gently on the dog's neck. Not a pet, a signal. Rex went still. Nora's breath hitched. Cole leaned toward her, lips near her ear, voice a thread. "No sound. If you panic, bite the scarf." Nora's eyes flashed indignation even in fear. She nodded anyway. The beam swept past the deer-blind slats, making light stripes on Cole's hands. One more step, and they'd see the outline of a man in plaid and a dog's amber eyes. Cole didn't wait for that. He moved first, quiet, decisive. He slid the blind's back panel open, the weak section he'd noticed earlier, and eased Rex through with a hand signal. The dog went without a sound, body low. Cole lifted Nora carefully, bracing her against his chest. Her legs trembled uselessly, muscles cramped from cold and strain. She was not a woman who accepted helplessness easily. She stiffened, fighting the indignity, and Cole felt her anger like heat through the blanket. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and meant it. Not sorry for carrying her, sorry for what people had done to force this. He slipped through the back panel, closing it gently behind them, and dropped into a shallow depression where wind had carved a groove. Snow immediately tried to hide their tracks. Good. He moved downwind and downhill, away from the flashlight, toward thicker brush. The forest here was younger, saplings and tangled rhododendron, perfect for losing a human's shape. Rex guided them, not with pulling, but with presence, weaving through gaps, pausing to listen, then moving again. Cole followed, stepping where the dog stepped, letting Rex's instincts right the path. Behind them, a shout snapped the air. "Over here! Tracks!" The wolves had found something, maybe Cole's earlier marker trail, maybe a fresh footprint near the blind. The beams swung. Cole's heart did not race. It tightened, focused. He moved faster, using a fallen log as a barrier, then ducking beneath its snow-capped belly. The log was hollowed on one side, an old rot channel, and it formed a crude tunnel. Cole pushed Nora gently into the hollow space, wrapping her tighter in the blanket so the bark didn't scrape skin. Rex crouched at the entrance, body angled so his black back blended with shadow. Nora's eyes were huge, her breath a thin fog. Cole pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded, jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. The wolves passed within 20 yards. Cole heard them clearly now, 4 men, maybe 5. One voice laughed too loud, trying to sound brave. Another voice, Brent, spoke low and furious. "She was here. That vet's out here too. Find the cop. The rest is easy." Vet. The word prickled Cole. Brent didn't know Cole's past, but he knew enough to fear competence. That fear would make him meaner. Cole waited until their boots moved past, then slid out of the log's hollow, pulling Nora with him. She tried to stand. Her knees buckled. Cole caught her again. "I hate this," she breathed, shame and rage mingling. Cole gave her a quick look, steel-gray eyes blunt. "Hate it later," he said. "Live now." Rex moved ahead and froze. His hackles lifted. Cole felt it too, an unnatural quiet, the kind that meant someone was listening instead of shouting. A flashlight beam clicked off somewhere nearby. Smart wolf. Cole scanned the snow and saw a thin line, wire, almost invisible against white. A trip line. He stopped so fast, Nora almost slid from his grip. He eased her down behind a spruce and crouched, using his knife tip to lift the wire gently. "They're setting traps," he whispered. Nora's eyes narrowed. "Because they think you're military," she whispered back. "They're right," Cole muttered, "but not in the way they think." He threaded them around the trap, then marked it mentally. If rescue teams came later, those lines could kill a volunteer. Cole's anger sharpened, cold, surgical. The wolves weren't just hunting, they were corrupting the forest. Cole kept moving, choosing terrain that would punish pursuers, a slope where snow lay soft and deep, hiding rocks beneath like teeth. Rex led them along the ridge line, then down into a narrow cut where the wind had packed snow hard like concrete. Cole's boots found purchase. He made sure Nora's weight stayed close to his center so he wouldn't slip. From behind, a shout rose. "I see him!" A beam stabbed through the trees and landed on Cole's plaid like a bullseye. Cole didn't run straight. He cut sideways, then down, forcing the pursuers to choose between speed and stability. One man took the slope too fast, boots punching into soft drift. The snow gave way, and he slid, arms pinwheeling, disappearing with a yelp behind a bank. The sound was half tragic, half ridiculous. A grown man getting humbled by gravity and winter like a cartoon villain. Cole almost smiled, because humor was the only part of him that still felt human. Rex, however, did not find it funny. The dog lunged forward, a silent missile, and snapped at the edge of another man's pant leg, not to maim, but to stop. The man stumbled backward, cursed, and raised his weapon. Cole's blood went cold. He shifted Nora behind a tree and stepped into view, body squared, voice like gravel. "Don't," he said. The man hesitated, not because of mercy, but because Cole sounded like someone who had ended arguments before. Brent's voice cut in, sharp and commanding. "No shooting. You hit the cop. You're dead." The man lowered the weapon reluctantly. Cole used the moment, one thin slice of time, to move again, grabbing Nora and pushing forward. They reached a tight cluster of boulders, limestone outcrops that formed a natural maze. Cole guided Nora through, and Rex slipped in after them, nails clicking softly on stone. In that maze, sound bounced weirdly. A pursuer could be 10 feet away and sound like he was 50. Cole used that, doubling back once, then ducking through a narrow gap, leaving a trail that would confuse. Nora's breath rasped. "Cole," she whispered, "they'll keep coming." "I know," he said. He wasn't comforting her. He was acknowledging the truth, like a soldier acknowledging incoming fire. The wolves wanted their boss, Duke Graves Malloy. Nora was currency. Cole was interference. Interference had to be removed. Another voice joined the search, new, unfamiliar. "Brent, we got a problem," someone called. This voice belonged to a younger man, jittery with fear. He sounded like he'd been forced into violence by loyalty and now regretted the membership. Cole risked a glance through the rocks. He saw the speaker briefly, a thin guy in his 20s with a pale face and a sharp chin, wearing a beanie too small for his head, cheeks raw from cold. He held a radio close, eyes darting. His name, Cole learned later, was Mason Pike. He looked like a kid who'd chosen the wrong friends and now couldn't find the exit. "What?" Brent snapped. "Road's active," Mason said. "Saw lights. Maybe a plow. Maybe deputies." Brent swore. "Then we end this fast." Cole's stomach tightened. That was the pivot he'd feared, pressure tightening their timeline. Wolves got violent when the trap started closing. Cole leaned close to Nora. "We need a hard vanish," he whispered. "A place they won't think to look because it looks like death." Nora's eyes searched his face. "You mean?" Cole nodded toward a narrow crevice between boulders where snow had drifted into a deep mouth. "We go into the belly of the mountain," he said, half myth, half tactic. Rex's ears perked like he understood the drama. Cole almost laughed again, because even in terror, his life was apparently a story with a dramatic dog. He lowered Nora carefully, guiding her into the crevice. It was tight, cold, but sheltered from wind and eyes. Rex followed, curling at the entrance like a dark sentry. Cole packed loose snow around the outer lip to blur their outline, leaving a tiny air gap. Then he sat, knife in hand, back against stone, and listened as wolves with boots circled their hiding place, close enough that Cole could smell cigarette smoke through the storm, while inside the crevice, Nora's breath warmed the air by degrees, and Rex's steady presence reminded Cole that survival was sometimes nothing more than refusing to let the cold win. Chapter summary. Inside the story, Cole extracts Nora and Rex from the deer blind, just as Brent's disciplined kidnappers close in, navigates tripwire traps and treacherous terrain to confuse pursuit, and uses a rocky outcrop maze and a narrow crevice to vanish again. Rex creates a brief diversion that prevents capture, while overheard radio chatter reveals the kidnappers feel time pressure from approaching road activity, making them more dangerous. The crevice held them like the clenched fist of the mountain. Outside, boots crunched and paused, voices muttered, a flashlight beam swept once across the snow lip and vanished. Cole kept his breathing shallow, knife resting across his palm, every muscle tuned to the sound of intent. Nora lay wedged beside him, shoulders hunched under the emergency blanket and Cole's leather jacket, eyes open but heavy. Rex stayed at the mouth like a carved guardian, black and tan fur dusted with snow, amber eyes watching the gaps between rocks the way a priest watches for a sign. Minutes stretched into something larger than minutes, something mythic and merciless, as if time itself had decided to test whether courage was real or just something people said in warm rooms. Then a radio crackle snapped the quiet. Brent's voice, near enough to taste. "Spread wider. He's hiding her. We find the cop, and we end this." Another voice, Mason Pike, trembled behind it. "Brent? That helicopter, if it comes—" "Then we move now," Brent hissed. Cole's jaw tightened. They were closing the net. Hiding was buying seconds, not salvation. Cole weighed the options. Staying meant getting found. Running meant leaving tracks and risking Nora's collapse. Fighting meant blood, and blood in snow made men reckless. Cole hated recklessness. He preferred inevitability. He leaned toward Nora, whispering so softly the words barely existed. "Do you have anything left from your kit? Anything reflective?" Nora's eyes focused, slow but determined. "My IFAC pouch. I have a signal mirror." Her voice was rough, but there was steel beneath it. She was a cop. She'd been trained to carry hope in small tools. Cole nodded once. "Good." He glanced at Rex. "We're going to move," he murmured. Rex's ears flicked, ready, like a blade sliding free. Cole waited for a gust, wind howling loud enough to mask movement, then pushed snow gently from the crevice lip and eased Nora out first, keeping her low. Rex slid out next, silent as smoke. Cole followed, sweeping snow behind them to blur the exit. They didn't head toward the service road. That was where the wolves expected prey to flee. Cole took them uphill instead, toward a ridgeline he knew from hunting and hard winters, a narrow spine where wind scoured snow thin, exposing patches of rock and dry needles. Moving uphill in a storm felt like arguing with a god, but it also meant fewer tracks and better sight lines. Cole half-carried Nora, half-guided her, letting her feet touch when they could, lifting when she faltered. She was shaking, but her jaw stayed set. Rex ran ahead and back, checking the air, then returning to brush his shoulder against Nora's leg, as if saying, "Stay here, stay with us." The ridge came into view as a darker line against white, a place where the trees thinned and the sky opened like a wound. Cole knew what he needed up there, a signal big enough for rescuers to see, but small enough to keep wolves uncertain. The problem was simple and cruel. Anything that called help would also call the kidnappers. But Cole was out of choices. If the wolves were boots, then the only answer was lightning. They reached a small saddle on the ridge where two boulders formed a windbreak. Cole eased Nora down behind the stone, shielding her from the worst of the gusts. "Stay low," he told her. "No silhouette." Nora nodded, then fumbled at her belt line, fingers stiff. She produced a small pouch, her individual first aid kit, scuffed, damp, but intact. "Here," she whispered. Cole opened it and found the signal mirror tucked inside, a compact square with a sighting hole. He held it up, the glass catching even the dim winter light and throwing it into his eyes like a slap. "Good." Rex stood beside Cole, posture alert, tail low, looking out over the slope below. The dog's presence was strangely ceremonial, like a guardian statue at the threshold of a temple. Cole rummaged in his pack for tinder, birch bark strips he'd kept dry in a bag, a bit of cotton with petroleum jelly, old field habit, plus his magnesium fire starter. He wasn't going to build a bonfire. A bonfire screamed, "Here I am." He needed something smarter, a low heat fire with thick white smoke that would drift and cling, visible from distance but harder to pinpoint at ground level. He worked quickly, hands numb, building a small teepee of dry twigs beneath the boulder's lee. He lit it with a spark shower and coaxed the flame to life, feeding it just enough to become steady. Then he layered wet leaves and green pine boughs on top, fuel that didn't burn clean, fuel that smoked like a dirty secret. The smoke thickened, a pale column that rose and twisted into the storm. Cole's throat tightened at the sight of it. He'd sent signals before, but those had been for extraction in places where everyone had agreed who the enemy was. Here, the enemy wore winter coats and called themselves family to a criminal. Nora watched, eyes wide. "They'll see that," she whispered. "So will the right people," Cole said. "If any of them are looking." Nora swallowed, then lifted the mirror in trembling hands. Cole positioned her with care, angling her behind the boulder so only the mirror's flash, not her face, would be visible. "You know SOS?" he asked. Nora's mouth twitched faintly, a dark humor rising like a stubborn weed. "I'm a police officer, Cole." "Fair," he said. "I'm annoyingly bossy under stress." Nora's breath hitched into something almost like a laugh. She raised the mirror, squinting through the sighting hole, and began flashing toward the direction of the main road, the faint gap in the tree line where distant movement might exist. Dot, 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 dash, 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 dot, dot, dot. The flashes were small but sharp, like a heartbeat made of light. Rex stood between them and the slope, ears pointed, scanning for movement. Cole kept the smoke going, feeding damp greenery and pulses so it stayed thick and white. The ridge wind carried it sideways, stretching the signal into a long banner. A banner that said, "Someone is alive up here. Someone is fighting." Minutes passed. The wolves below shouted again, faint but closer now. Cole heard them arguing with each other, frustration making their voices rise. "Tracks go up," someone barked. "He's on the ridge." Brent's voice furious. "Move! He's calling for help!" Nora's hands trembled harder, but she didn't stop flashing. Her face, pale, freckled, blue-lipped, looked carved from determination. She was no longer just a hostage. She was a participant in her own rescue. Cole felt an unexpected sting behind his eyes, the kind that came when you watched someone refuse to break. He looked away quickly. Feelings were luxuries. The smoke thickened, the flashes continued. And then, far off, a sound broke through the storm, low at first, like thunder rolling behind mountains, then distinct, rhythmic. Rotor blades. A helicopter. Cole's chest tightened so hard it hurt. The sound grew, pushing through wind like a stubborn promise. Nora's eyes widened, tears freezing at the corners. "Hear that?" she whispered, like she was afraid the sound would vanish if she named it. "I hear it," Cole said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Rex lifted his head and gave a single quiet huff, not a bark, more like a relieved exhale. The helicopter's searchlight pierced the gray-white sky, sweeping the ridgeline in long arcs. It passed once, twice, then swung back as if something had tugged its attention. The light caught Cole's smoke column, turned it silver, then drifted toward the boulder. Nora flashed harder, more frantic now, her SOS becoming a desperate conversation with the sky. The beam paused, hovered, shifted closer. Cole's heart pounded. He wanted to wave, to shout, to become visible. He didn't. Visibility was a gamble. He stayed behind the boulder, controlled, and let the signals speak for him. The helicopter dropped lower, the sound intensifying until it felt like the air was being beaten into obedience. A voice crackled from above through a loudspeaker, distorted by wind. "This is County Air Unit. If you can hear me, stay where you are." Cole didn't move. Nora whispered, "That's us." Cole nodded once. "Stay low," and he repeated, "until they're close enough to see the right person." Below, boots began pounding faster. The wolves had heard it too. Brent's crew surged up the slope like a pack scenting blood, their discipline sharpened, not loosened. They didn't shoot into the air, they didn't scream uselessly, they moved with purpose, knowing time was collapsing. Cole caught glimpses of them between trees, dark shapes climbing, weapons held low, flashlights off to avoid being spotted from above. Brent was among them, broad-shouldered, hood up, beard rimmed with frost, eyes fixed upward with a predator's rage. He wasn't just angry. He was terrified of failing the man they worshipped. Cole's mind clicked into a new mode. Protect the signal, protect Nora, survive the final sprint. He grabbed a handful of wet leaves and smothered the fire slightly, reducing flame while keeping smoke. "If they reach us, we break contact," Cole said to Nora. "You keep the mirror. If I say down, you go down." Nora's eyes flicked to him. "And you?" Cole's mouth tightened. "I'm not letting them touch you again." Rex stepped forward, body tense, ready, a retired soldier who had never really retired. The helicopter beam swept again, now clearly locked onto the smoke. It shifted to the boulder and lingered. Cole could almost feel the crew's eyes above, searching for a human shape. Nora flashed once more, a clean, deliberate SOS. The beam blinked, like the sky answering. But at the same time, from below, a rock clattered, and a man's silhouette appeared through the snow haze 20 yards down the ridge. The wolves had nearly arrived. Brent's voice carried, sharp as a whip, "Drop the cop!" Cole stood slowly behind the boulder, just enough to be seen by the men below, and just enough to be seen by the helicopter above. He made himself the story on purpose. "Come get her," Cole called back, voice steady, loud enough to cut wind. Dark humor threaded through it like a fuse. "Bring your running shoes." One of the men lunged forward and slipped on the wind-scoured rock, sliding several feet on his backside with an undignified grunt. Even Nora, shaking and half-frozen, let out a single breath that sounded like a laugh. It was the briefest comedy in the middle of a tragedy, but it mattered. It reminded them they were still human. Brent didn't laugh. His face twisted with fury. He raised his hand, signaling his men to spread and flank the boulder. Cole's blood went cold. The helicopter's beam remained fixed, and Cole knew the crew could now see the shapes climbing, could see this wasn't a stranded hiker problem anymore. He prayed, silent, unfamiliar, not for himself, for seconds. For one clean moment where help arrived before wolves' closed teeth. Rex growled low, a sound like a warning bell. Nora gripped the mirror so hard her knuckles went white beneath frost. Above, the helicopter dipped again, and a new voice crackled. "Urgent! Ground team inbound! Hold position!" Brent heard it too. He surged forward, deciding to close the deal before uniforms could reach the ridge. The fire kept smoking. The mirror kept flashing. And Cole Hayes, veteran with war in his bones, planted himself between a wounded officer and wolves with boots, ready to become the last obstacle the storm would ever see. Chapter Summary. Inside the story. Cole and Nora risk exposure to call rescue by building a thick white smoke signal with green pine and wet leaves and flashing SOS with Nora's signal mirror from a ridge. A county helicopter finally spots the signals, but Brent's kidnappers also see them and rush uphill to seize Nora before authorities arrive, forcing Cole and Rex to brace for a final confrontation at the boulder windbreak. Snow didn't fall anymore. It hunted. It came sideways, sharp as salt, turning the ridge into a white stage where every breath betrayed you. The helicopter's beam stayed pinned to the smoke like the eye of a god that had finally noticed. And still the wolves climbed. Brent Kellen's men moved in a spreading fan, disciplined enough to flank, desperate enough to gamble. They didn't rush straight into the light. They tried to crawl around it, using tree trunks and boulders like shields. Cole saw the pattern instantly. War had taught him this language. One man fixes you, two men move. Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the cold air like an engine turning over. Nora, crouched low behind the rock windbreak, clutched her signal mirror with shaking hands. Her face was ghost pale, freckles stark against frost, lips blue at the edges, but her eyes were clear now, pure law, pure survival. "They're flanking," she whispered. "I know," Cole said. His voice was steady, but inside he was a locked room full of lightning. He glanced up. The helicopter's loudspeaker crackled again. "Ground units are 2 minutes out. Stay down, stay down." 2 minutes was an eternity when Boots were 20 yards away. Cole made a choice that felt like swallowing a blade. He smothered the fire completely with snow and pine boughs, killing the flame while leaving the smoke residue hanging in the air. Then he took Nora by the shoulder, gentle, firm, and guided her away from the boulder, down a narrow chute between rocks where wind had scoured snow to hard crust. "We're moving," he murmured. "Toward what?" Nora asked. Her breath came tight. Cole's eyes flicked to the dark shape of an abandoned cabin down the slope, old timber, rusted tin roof, half swallowed by winter. He'd spotted it earlier when they first climbed the ridge, a forgotten wound in the woods. "Toward a place they'll choose," he said. "They want a stage for a trade. Let them." Nora stared at him. "You're going to let them take me?" Cole's mouth tightened. "No," he said. "I'm going to let them think they're in control." They slid down the chute in short, controlled steps. Rex moved first, silent, then returned to brace Nora's side when she stumbled. Cole kept them low, using the rocks as cover. Behind them, Brent barked orders. "Cut them off! Get the cop alive!" The words were a leash around his men's throats. Alive meant hesitation. Hesitation meant openings. They reached the cabin's edge just as the helicopter beam swept past, momentarily losing them behind the tree line. The cabin sat in a small clearing, like a rotten tooth in the gum of the forest. The door hung crooked. One window was a black hole. The air smelled of old smoke and wet wood. Cole led Nora inside and crouched behind a collapsed table, pulling her close to the wall where shadows were thickest. Rex took position near the doorway, body tense, head low, ready to explode. Nora's gaze snapped around the interior, cataloging details like a camera. Boot prints, a coil of rope in the corner, a dented metal stove that hadn't been used in years. She was weak, but her mind was sharp, the kind of woman who would remember a kidnapper's ring, a scar, the way he held his gun, and turn it into a conviction later. Cole respected that. It also reminded him she didn't need saving like a porcelain doll. She needed a chance. Outside, Boots approached. Brent didn't enter immediately. He circled, cautious now that the helicopter had seen them. Cole heard the mutter of radios, the clipped voice of Mason Pike whining with fear. "Brent, we're out of time." Brent answered coldly, "Then we make time." A beam of a flashlight flickered through the cabin's window hole. Cole stayed still. Rex's muscles quivered. Nora's breath caught. Then Brent's voice came, louder, aimed at the cabin like a command to a prisoner. "Officer Blake, you want to live? You call it in, right now." Nora's eyes widened. Cole leaned close, whispering, "Don't answer." But Brent knew the game. "I can drag you back into the trees," he called. "I can make you disappear, or you can speak into your radio and tell them the terms. Graves for you, tonight." Nora swallowed hard. Her hand trembled toward her shoulder mic. Still clipped there, the small black piece of plastic that connected her to a world that felt impossibly far away. Cole caught her wrist gently and shook his head once. His eyes said, "Not yet." Rex shifted, claws scraping wood. Brent's men moved closer, boots on rotten boards outside, testing the cabin's perimeter. Cole's mind spun through possibilities like a roulette wheel. They couldn't hold the cabin if the wolves rushed. They couldn't run far with Nora like this. They needed to fracture the pack. Cole glanced at Rex and made a hand signal, 2 taps against his own thigh, then a point toward the cabin's side wall. Rex's ears flicked. The dog understood more than words. He understood intention. Rex slipped through a broken gap in the wall, silent, fluid, a shadow becoming night. The moment Rex vanished, Cole felt naked. It was like sending his last reliable friend into the dark alone, but he needed the wolves' attention divided. Outside, Rex created a sudden burst of noise, a deliberate crash of branches, a snort, a low growl that sounded like something large moving fast. 2 of Brent's men snapped their lights toward it. "Over there," one hissed. Brent cursed. "Stay on the cabin." But his men were human, and fear tugged them. 2 peeled off toward Rex's noise, boots crunching away. Cole exhaled. The net loosened. Then Brent moved. He kicked the cabin door. It slammed inward, hinges screaming. Cold air rushed in like a predator. Brent stepped into the doorway, tall and broad, beard rimmed with ice, eyes bright with a desperate kind of hate. In the weak beam of his flashlight, his face looked carved, sharp cheekbones, a scar cutting through one eyebrow, jaw clenched like he was holding in a lifetime of rage. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a man who'd built his identity around a single loyalty: Duke Graves Malloy. If you cut that loyalty, he'd bleed out. Behind Brent, Mason Pike hovered, pale and jittery, gun held wrong like a kid holding a snake. Another man stayed outside, covering angles. Brent's light swept the cabin interior. "I know you're in here," he growled. "You and that dog." Cole didn't move until the beam hit Nora's face. Nora flinched, instinctive, and Brent's mouth curled. "There you are." He stepped forward. Cole rose from behind the collapsed table like a ghost deciding to be seen. "Wrong direction," Cole said. Brent froze a fraction. The fraction mattered. Cole didn't throw a punch like a movie hero. He closed distance, seized Brent's wrist with both hands, and rotated, an efficient joint lock that turned bones into leverage. Brent's flashlight clattered to the floor. Brent grunted, trying to muscle out. Cole's grip was unglamorous, brutal in its simplicity. He'd learned it in places where pretty moves got you killed. Brent tried to twist, but Cole stepped behind him, pinned his elbow high, and drove him into the wall. The wood groaned. Mason yelped and raised his gun. "Don't!" Nora snapped, voice sharp despite weakness. Mason hesitated, startled that his hostage had become a command. In that hesitation, Cole shoved Brent away, creating space. "Mason," Brent snarled, "shoot him!" Mason's hands shook. His eyes flicked between Brent and Nora, panic tearing him apart. He wasn't built for murder. He was built for following. Cole saw it and used it. "You don't want this," Cole said calmly. "You're not that guy." Mason's mouth opened. No words came. Outside, Rex's noise suddenly shifted closer, rapid, aggressive, like he was chasing something toward the cabin. One of the men who'd peeled off shouted, "That dog's on me!" Another cursed, "He's circling back." Brent's attention snapped outward. He lunged toward Nora instead, grabbing her by the coat collar, yanking her upright. Nora cried out, legs buckling. Brent pressed a knife, folding blade, cheap but sharp, against her throat, just enough to steal breath, not enough to cut. "Back off," Brent roared at Cole, "or she bleeds." Nora's eyes flashed with fury and fear. Cole's chest tightened. He lifted his hands slowly, palms open. "Easy," he said, voice low. He stepped back one pace, just one, keeping his eyes on Brent's knife hand. Nora kept her chin slightly lifted, trying not to press into the blade. Even in terror, she controlled angles. She was thinking like a cop, survive the moment, then win the case. Brent dragged her toward the door, using her as a shield, trying to break out before ground units arrived. That was the trade now. Not Graves for Nora, Nora for escape. And then Rex hit, not a full bite to flesh. Rex lunged and clamped onto Brent's heavy jacket sleeve near the forearm, teeth catching cloth and yanking hard. The force pulled Brent's knife hand offline for a second, just a second, but the second was everything. Nora dropped her weight, twisting low the way her academy training had taught her, rolling out of Brent's grip like a hard-earned reflex. She tumbled across the cabin floor, shoulders slamming into planks, but she was free. Brent stumbled, trying to shake Rex off, cursing, swinging his arm. Rex held, growling, eyes fierce. Cole surged forward and drove his shoulder into Brent's chest, slamming him into the doorframe. Brent's breath whooshed out. Mason Pike screamed and bolted, disappearing into the storm like a rabbit. Outside, red and blue lights suddenly pulsed between trees, turning the snow into a carnival of emergency colors. Sirens wailed, too loud but blessed, cutting through the blizzard like trumpets. Brent's eyes went wild. "No, no," he snarled, trying to run, but Cole hooked his arm, twisted and forced him down. Rex released and backed up, chest heaving. Nora, shaking, pushed herself to her knees. A voice outside boomed, authoritative. "Sheriff's office! Hands, now!" Boots pounded toward the cabin. Many boots, organized boots, the kind that meant the wolves were about to become trapped prey. Men shouted, commands overlapped, radios crackled with coordinates. Cole kept Brent pinned, breath steaming, muscles burning. Brent spat blood and hate. Graves isn't here," Cole cut in, voice cold. "And neither is your future." The cabin door burst fully open again, this time with uniforms. 3 deputies in winter gear, weapons drawn but controlled. The lead deputy was a man in his late 40s with a squared face, salt and pepper beard trimmed close, eyes steady and tired in a way that said he'd seen too much and still chose to show up. Sergeant Eli Mercer. He moved like someone who didn't waste motion. His gaze flicked from Cole to Nora to Rex, assessing in one breath. "Officer Blake?" he called. Nora lifted her chin, voice hoarse but clear. "Here." Mercer's eyes softened for half a heartbeat. Then they hardened again as he looked at Brent. "Cuff him," Mercer ordered. 2 deputies moved in, snapping restraints onto Brent's wrists. Outside, more figures appeared, blocking exits, spreading into the trees. The wolves were being sealed off from every direction. Cole finally let his breath out, long and shaking. Nora looked at him, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, disbelief, the fragile miracle of still being alive. Rex stepped to Nora's side, pressed his head against her knee like a silent vow. Mercer glanced at Cole, recognizing something in his posture. "You the one who lit the signal?" he asked. Cole nodded once. "And the one who kept her alive," Mercer said quietly, not as praise, but as acknowledgement. Cole's mouth tightened, emotion threatening to surface. He shoved it down, just for now. Survive first, feel later. Outside, the blizzard kept falling, indifferent as ever. But inside the cabin, the trade in the night had failed, because a veteran, a dog, and a stubborn officer had refused to become a message. Chapter summary inside the story. Brent forces a makeshift trade by trying to make Nora call in terms from an abandoned cabin. But Cole disrupts the formation by sending Rex to draw 2 men away, then uses a clean joint lock to neutralize Brent briefly. When Brent grabs Nora with a knife, Rex bites and yanks Brent's sleeve just enough for Nora to roll free, and arriving law enforcement, led by Sergeant Eli Mercer, surrounds and arrests Brent as red and blue lights cut through the trees. The abandoned cabin filled with uniforms, breath, and the sharp scent of adrenaline cooling into aftermath. Outside, the storm kept doing what storms always do, erasing footprints and pretending nothing mattered. Inside, Brent Kellen sat cuffed on the warped floorboards, jaw clenched, eyes still burning with the kind of rage that survives even when the fight is over. 2 deputies held him steady while Sergeant Eli Mercer read him rights in a voice that didn't rise, didn't perform, just delivered truth like a weight. Nora Blake sat against the wall, wrapped in a thermal blanket that made her look smaller than she was, shivering hard enough to rattle teeth. Her freckles stood out against skin gone pale, and her dark hair, usually tidy under a cap, hung loose in damp strands, sticking to her cheekbones. She kept her posture anyway, chin lifted like a stubborn flag. Rex paced once, then pressed close to her boots, offering warmth the way he'd offered it all night, without asking to be thanked. Cole stood near the doorway, snow melting off his worn brown leather jacket in slow drips, red and black plaid shirt visible beneath like a wound that refused to close. His stubble was frosted at the edges, eyes steady but far away, as if the cabin were still a battlefield and he was waiting for the second wave. Mercer finished, nodded to a deputy. "Get him out," he said. Brent was hauled upright. He tried to speak, but it came out as a bitter laugh. "You think you won?" he rasped. "Graves?" Mercer cut him off with a glance. "Graves isn't going anywhere." His voice was calm, but there was iron beneath it. "You tried to use a hostage to bend the law. That's not a negotiation. That's a sentence." Brent's eyes flicked to Nora, then to Cole, then to Rex. Something in his expression shifted, fear maybe, that a dog and a man he couldn't predict had undone him. "This doesn't end," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Cole didn't answer. He knew better than to argue with a drowning man. The deputies dragged Brent out into the storm. Outside, other suspects were being intercepted in the trees, shouts, commands, the scuffle of bodies in snow. A few minutes later, Mercer's radio crackled with updates. 2 detained near the ridgeline, 1 caught by the service road, 1 still missing. Mason Pike. Mercer's eyes narrowed. He was the kind of man who didn't let loose ends become tragedies. "We'll find him," he said, voice low, more vow than plan. Then his gaze returned to Nora. "Medics inbound," he told her. "You're going to the hospital." Nora swallowed, blinking slowly. "I'm fine," she tried automatically. Mercer's expression didn't soften, but it warmed. "You're not," he said, "and we don't lose our own to pride." Nora's eyes flicked toward Cole, and for the first time that night her face showed something other than survival. It showed gratitude, raw, almost painful. Cole, sensing her stare, shifted his weight like a man trying to step away from a spotlight. He didn't like being seen. Being seen meant being remembered, and being remembered meant the past could reach him again. Rex walked up to Cole and leaned his shoulder into Cole's knee, as if anchoring him to this moment. Cole's hand went automatically to Rex's neck, fingers brushing the thick fur dusted with ice. The dog was older now, retired, scarred, still strong in the chest, but slower in the joints. His muzzle carried a faint gray along the whiskers. His eyes, though, were bright and stubborn, mercy with teeth. The helicopter arrived not long after, its rotors thumping the air into a frantic rhythm. The cabin vibrated, snow shaking from rafters. A medic ducked into the doorway wearing a bright orange flight suit and a helmet marked with a county insignia. She was a woman in her late 30s, lean and quick, with warm brown skin and dark hair braided tight under her helmet. Her eyes were sharp, kind, and unafraid, eyes that had looked at chaos and learned to speak calmly anyway. Her name patch read, Lena Park. She moved like a person who didn't waste seconds. "Officer," she called, already kneeling at Nora's side. Nora tried to sit straighter, but Lena put a steady hand on her shoulder. "Save the bravado," Lena said, not unkindly. "Give me your wrist." She checked Nora's pulse, then her pupils, then the temperature strip on a small device she pressed against Nora's forehead. Her mouth tightened. "Hypothermia," she said. "Mild to moderate. Dehydration. Rope burns. Possible concussion." Nora opened her mouth to argue again. Lena held up 2 fingers. "2 choices," she said. "You come with me willingly, or I tell your sergeant you're being unreasonable, and he carries you out like a sack of flour." Nora's lips twitched despite herself. "He would," she admitted hoarsely. Lena smiled once, quick as a match strike. "He absolutely would." She looked up at Mercer. "She needs warm IV, oxygen, and observation." Mercer nodded once. Then Lena's gaze shifted to Cole, taking him in, leather jacket, plaid shirt, that quiet look like he'd made peace with violence and never enjoyed it. "And you," she said, pointing lightly. "Hands." Cole blinked. "I'm fine." Lena gave him the same look she'd given Nora, a blend of humor and authority. "Everyone in this cabin is fine until they pass out in the snow," she said. "Hold still." She checked his pulse and the temperature at his neck. "Borderline," she muttered. "Exhaustion, dehydration, you're running on spite." Cole's mouth tightened. "It works." Lena snorted. "Only until it doesn't." Rex moved closer, sniffing Lena's glove. Lena paused, then let Rex inspect her, speaking softly without babying. "Hey, old soldier," she murmured. Rex's ears flicked. He accepted her, then returned to Nora's side. Nora watched that interaction like it meant something sacred, that even in the middle of violence, the dog still chose trust carefully. Lena and a deputy helped Nora to her feet. Nora swayed, and Cole stepped forward instinctively, but Mercer held up a hand. "We've got her," Mercer said. It wasn't dismissal, it was protection of Nora and of Cole's fragile distance. They guided Nora out. The helicopter's wind hit like a slap, snow stinging her face. She hunched into the thermal blanket and took one step, then another, determined not to be carried. Cole followed to the threshold, stopping just inside the cabin's shadow, as if crossing into the rotor wash would pull him into a world he didn't want. Nora paused at the edge, turning back. The storm framed her face like myth, ice in her lashes, breath a pale ribbon. She looked at Cole, then at Rex. Her voice was small, swallowed by wind, but the words landed anyway. "You saved me," she said, like people save each other in old stories. Cole's shoulders rose in a half shrug, the closest he came to comfort. "Rex saved you," he said, half joke, half confession. "I just follow the dog." Rex exhaled hard through his nose, a sound that could have been a laugh if dogs believed in comedy. Even Mercer's mouth twitched at the corner. Nora's eyes shone. She reached out her hand, fingers trembling, and Cole took it, not with warmth, but with steadiness. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone half frozen, like she was transferring something into him, proof that this night had meant something more than survival. "Don't disappear," she whispered. Cole didn't promise. Promises were heavy, but he nodded once. The helicopter swallowed Nora into its belly, and Lena climbed in after her, securing straps, speaking calm words over the roar. The rotors lifted the machine into the white air, carrying Nora toward heat and light. Cole watched until it became a fading noise. Then he turned back into the woods where the storm erased the sky. Mercer approached him, careful, respectful. "You did good tonight," Mercer said. Cole's jaw tightened. Praise always felt like a hook. "I did what needed doing," Cole answered. Mercer nodded slowly. "That's what good is," he said. Then his gaze dropped to Rex. "And this one." Rex stood tall, snow clinging to his fur, eyes tired but alert. Mercer crouched and offered a gloved hand to let Rex sniff it. Rex did, then looked away, acceptance without flattery. Mercer smiled faintly. "K9?" Cole nodded. "Retired." "Doesn't look retired," Mercer said. Cole looked down at Rex. "EOX." "He doesn't know how." Mercer's radio crackled again. Mason Pike found, cold, scared, hands up by the service road. Mercer exhaled, relief briefly softening him. "All right," he said. "We wrap this." Cole felt the cabin's warmth vanish as reality returned. He wanted to go home. He wanted to go back to being invisible. But he knew invisibility was a lie now. Someone had seen his signal. Someone had seen his dog. Someone had seen him choose to stay. Weeks passed. Winter remained, but not as violent. The forest turned quieter, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Cole repaired his cabin roof where the wind had bitten shingles loose. He chopped wood with Rex lying nearby, head on paws, eyes half closed. The world tried to go back to normal. It didn't fully succeed. One afternoon, when snow fell gently like ash from a distant fire, Cole heard a vehicle on the service road, slow, cautious. Not the roar of a wolf pack. A single engine. Rex stood, ears forward, then gave a low huff. Cole stepped onto the porch, boots crunching. A county SUV eased into view, stopping at the edge of his clearing. The door opened. Nora Blake stepped out. She looked different, not weaker, but newly scarred by truth. Her face had color again, but the cold had left a memory in her eyes. She wore a winter coat and a knit cap pulled low, hair tucked away. Her movements were careful, as if her body still remembered being tied to a chair and refused to forget. She held something small in her gloved hand. She approached slowly, respectful of distance. "Cole," she said. Cole didn't correct how she said his name, like it was both question and gratitude. "You shouldn't be here," he said, half serious. Nora's mouth twitched. "I'm a police officer," she replied. "I go where I shouldn't." Rex walked up to her, sniffed her boots, then pressed his head into her knee. Nora's breath caught. She crouched and scratched his neck gently. "Hey, hero," she whispered. Then she stood and held out what she'd brought. Not a big gift, not a dramatic offering, just a small metal badge-shaped token, palm-sized, with simple engraving that caught the gray light. "No one left behind in the storm." Cole stared at it. His throat tightened. He didn't reach for it immediately. Nora didn't push. She simply held it there like an oath held out for acceptance. "I don't know how to repay you," she said, "so I didn't try to buy you. I just wanted you to have something that tells the truth." Cole's hand finally closed around the token. The metal was cold, but it felt heavier than metal. Rex sniffed it once and huffed, as if approving the wording. Cole let out a small breath that was almost a laugh. "He's going to think he earned a medal," Cole muttered. Nora smiled, eyes glossy. "He did," she said. Cole looked at Rex, then back at Nora, and for a moment the war inside his bones quieted. Not gone, just quieter. In that pause, the storm felt less like punishment and more like proof that oaths mattered. That love, strange, stubborn love, could show up wearing a badge, a leather jacket, or a retired dog's fur. And sometimes miracles didn't arrive on wings or in thunder. Sometimes they arrived on four paws, running through a white forest like a star that knew how to bark. Chapter summary inside the story. Brent and his crew are fully detained. Graves is not released. Nora is assessed by flight medic Lena Park and evacuated by helicopter for hypothermia and injuries. Before leaving, Nora thanks Cole in a mythic whisper, and Cole deflects with humor, crediting Rex. Weeks later, Nora returns to Cole's cabin to offer a small engraved token, no one left behind in the storm, and the three share a quiet oath that the blizzard can't erase. In the end, the blizzard was never just weather. It was a test of nerve, of mercy, of whether a promise can still stand when the world turns white and cruel. And when Nora held that small token in her glove, it felt like one of those quiet miracles God prefers, Not thunder, not spectacle, just the right soul arriving at the right moment, guided by love that refuses to leave. Maybe that's how heaven works more often than we notice. Not with wings in the clouds, but with footsteps in the snow, with a weary veteran who keeps walking anyway, with a brave woman who won't let fear write the last sentence, with an old dog who still believes his job is to protect, like a little guardian angel wearing fur instead of feathers. And the lesson follows us back into ordinary life. Most days don't look like a forest rescue. They look like a neighbor who needs a call, a lonely person at the grocery store who needs a smile, a family member who needs forgiveness more than advice. The world is full of small storms, grief, sickness, worry, exhaustion. And sometimes the miracle isn't that the storm disappears. It's that God sends someone to stand beside you until it passes. So if this story touched your heart, don't keep it locked inside you like warmth you never share. Share it with someone who needs hope. Comment below. Have you ever felt God send you help at the exact right time? Or who was the Rex in your life, the protector who showed up when you couldn't save yourself? And please subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and faith. Because in a world with so much cold, we're building a place where hearts stay warm. May God bless you and your home. May He send comfort to anyone watching who feels alone tonight. May He protect your family, heal your burdens, and guide you through every storm until the snow clears and you can breathe again. Amen.